So it's the core values. When I talk about values, I'm not talking about I'm ethical, honest, not those type of values. I'm talking about life values, basically. Okay. And the life values are something that we tend to bring in with us from our childhood voids. So I'm going to speak a little bit about that. So when we are children, we observe our parents, watch them, and learn from them. Okay. We also have other role models like grandparents who set the tone for how we interact with our environment. We have teachers who also do that for us. We have our churches, our places of religious worship that also do that for us. And we as kids absorb much of what we know of the world through the process of observing and learning by testing our boundaries with these people, foundational people in our lives, right? People that we connect with deeply and people we look up to and admire in a lot of ways. So much of how we think and act it actually comes from our childhood and our young adulthood. So much of the patterns of how we function in our later years as adults, and especially in our relationships, comes from our childhood. So the reason I mention this is because we tend to carry certain values with us throughout our adult life. And a lot of times when people come into relationships, they tend to keep these values. And also these values kind of become a source of disconnect and even contention a lot of times in our lives. Okay. So what we want to get anchored into is how we've developed these values, and all values come from the perception of void in our lives. So let me give you an example of that. Okay. I might have an interaction with my father. Okay. Where my father was very busy reading his newspaper, okay, when he was inside the house. Now, I go to him as a child and say, Dad, can you help me with this? And he says to me, I'm busy right now, don't bother me. So right there as kids, we go, why did my dad say that to me? Okay. And we may initially let it go, but after maybe one or two tries of doing this, we look at that and we go, what is it about me that he is doing this to me? So we make it personal. And when this happens, we get into the game of we are not enough, and we try to buy our love by trading something within us. And the way we do this is we might say, I'll just be a good girl. I won't bother him when he's reading his paper. I'll sit there and I'll wait for him to finish reading his paper. And so what we do is we absorb this lesson as, now dad is kind of the first role model of how we interact with men. Now we may take this into a relationship, and anytime we enter into a relationship, when the guy is doing something, again, this is a benign example, it's just an example, you might say, well, he's busy. I'm not going to talk to him right now because he's busy. Subconsciously, what has actually happened is we have a perception and a filter that we derived from our dad when we were young, that we have now generalized and said all men are like that. So this program is really about unwinding this pattern of thinking that gets us in trouble. So it gets us in trouble because what we start to actually do, instead of appreciating the person for who they are, we start to take it personally and project our shitty values onto them. And we say, you must live in my values because this is what I learned as the moral construct of behavior in a relationship. This is very, very important. Okay. And when we do this, when we start to project, the other person is coming in with their own value systems. And the moment they see that we're projecting our value systems into them, they're going to resist us. And when both people are in resistance, this creates a conflict in every relationship. So what we want to instead do is to learn to recognize and differentiate what is ours and theirs. So the reason I give this background is because the values are the foundation for doing that. Okay. Mm-hmm. So dad didn't give me something in my childhood. Now I project it onto every man as he's doing it because of this. And I demand it out of him. Okay. I pressurize him into giving it. And that doesn't work in a relationship, because a relationship, when we are born as children, and I'll talk about this in the physiology and psychology of stress, when we're born as children, we come in with no boundaries. Nothing is wrong. Everything is good. But the moment something like this happens with our dad, we then learn to say, I cannot be anchored in this nothingness that I was born in. I have to buy love, so I have to please people to get the love I want. I have to appease, I have to go and live in their values to get the love I want. So we go away from our true north to the magnetic north. Okay? And what we then realize as we start to enter into relationships outside of our familial, social, and cultural constructs, we start to realize that things are not going according to plan. It's not going according to our expectations. We were taught that, we innocently followed that, and now things are not going according to plan. So a lot of us who've come into our spiritual work have recognized that things are not going according to plan. So we start to put in our spiritual journey, we start to look at ourselves and say, why have I been doing this? And unlike regular spiritual work, there's a difference between spiritual work and relationship work. The difference is this: spiritual work is to help us stay true to our purpose in life. Relationship work and love work are about specifically applying it to relationships, applying our inner work to relationships to make them whole and complete. Spiritual work helps us to anchor into the purpose of our life, of our existence. Relationship is only one part of our existence. There are other dimensions to our existence, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay? So this is the grounding with which I want to get into this work. It's the first time I did this for myself. I was mind blown at how I had not seen my life in a whole way. So you can get anchored in that connection. And now from that space of connection and anchor, it's a lot easier for us to bring somebody else into our lives.